had a great conversation today with David Steen with his book Almost Home, Setting Your Eyes on Heaven. Oh man, what a great guy. It was awesome. So it was good to finally sit down and have that conversation with him because uh, we had two tries of that that we failed one way or another. I did with the technology, and third time's a charm. So hey, that went over pretty well today. The only thing is that, man, I wish I took off my glasses because I have this glare from the light. Well, hey, what can you do? Live and learn. But hey, tune in here. This is a great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. And no further ado, I'm going to let you enjoy it. Welcome back. And we are back here with episode 6 with David Steen. He is the author of Almost Home. And this is a wonderful moment to be able to sit down and talk about that path to heaven, to be able to talk about this great work that he has been able to put together. We're going to talk a little bit about the ins and outs, but before we even get started here, this is actually our third conversation of attempting this podcast. And for the two other times that we sat down to do this, there was just one issue or another that it just wasn't good. It just didn't come out great. It wasn't clear. It was a mess. So for whatever reason, the devil really wants this one to sit on the sidelines, but praise God for tenacity. So David, welcome. I'm glad that you're here. Man, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Adam. Thanks for having me. I tell you, you never know what's going on when things just don't go right, but the ability to have some stick-to-itiveness and stay with it, have some tenacity to get through it, that's a good thing. And so here we are. We're going to get through this, brother, and it's going to be
Um,
a good talk.
this one is already it's already off to a great start. I see you've got your coffee. I've got mine. Um, uh, what do you drink in the way of coffee? What's your coffee taste?
Dark roast black all the
Mm,
time.
mm.
This is actually the one I've been drinking for years. It's Seattle's Best. They're
Mm.
number 5 dark blend, so that's kind of what I stick with.
Oh, okay. We've had some Seattle's Best come this way. Once in a while, it'll show up in our office at work. And it's like, oh, interesting taste. Okay, all right. That West Coast flavor. Right now, I have Ani's a big fan of Aldi's.
Yeah,
I'm not crazy of Aldi's myself. Great products. I can't stand shopping there. But they have I don't get the cart thing, that's the thing that just kind of drives me crazy. And the no bags. But aside from that, they have a coffee there. It's a bourbon coffee from Messi, Barissimo. I think that's the name of the company. So European coffee, but it's pretty good. If you're into bourbon and coffee, it's kind of a nice little blend. So that's
yeah.
what I'm sipping on. But I'm right there with you on the black stuff. So it's the stuff that keeps me going. But welcome back, man. I'm glad that you're here because you've got a great story to tell with this book. Not only the fact that, hey, this is your first official book that has really hit the scenes here, but you have just an amazing story inside of it, really broadcasting this journey of faith for you and your family through tough struggles and through many blessings as well. And you have a great story to tell. So maybe we can start with just asking the question, what does it mean to be almost home?
So this just digs deep into a long part of our history. My wife and I have always been, you know, adamantly pursuing the American dream. You know, get out of school, get an education, get a good job, and build your family, your castle, your house, and so we did that. We actually did it the hard way. My wife and I both married young and went through a terrible marriage piece, both of us, and came out of that a total mess in our 20s.
Mm.
And so we were both, before we knew each other, uh, struggling to even wonder if the Lord was ever going to have us marry again. And so
Mm.
miraculously, through some amazing turn of events that the Lord brought together, He brought us together in our late 20s, and we became a family. I had two children, she had two, and so we immediately doubled in size from three to six. And so in the midst of that growth, still chasing after the American dream, starting over at a place that I wouldn't wish on anybody, to start in the middle of a step family and trying to figure out all the ins and outs of that. But,
Mm.
we were still just desiring all the same things that most people want, not necessarily selfish, just longing for the American dream.
Mm.
And as our family continued to grow, we really needed some space and needed a bigger house and needed some room for the kids to be able to have some space. And so we built uh, what I would say was our dream house on a nice hillside, and probably what most people would just dream about, and we did.
Mm.
And then in the midst of all that, and getting that larger house, getting, our family growing in size, I guess we were like so many people, just gathering up things. We had more closets, more storage, more stuff. And, we've always been, kind of had a mindset of thinking about heaven, thinking about the place beyond the here and now. But in the midst of all that, the Lord really told us to downsize and step away from this big house, because that was the place we thought we were going to live for the rest of our lives. We built this dream house, nice big wraparound porch swing, place in the woods, where the kids could play, and but God told us to let go of it and let go of so much stuff. And so, and that took a while, to get to that point. But in the midst of all that struggle, in selling that house, and downsizing, God moved us to a new place. And of course, I'm giving you a lot of little snippets from the book, but uh, when the Lord took us to this place, He moved us to a farm, which is a place that we had longed for. Even when we built the dream house, we really wanted it to be on a farm out in the country. But when He moved us to this place, and he got us on the property where we had this farm where we live now, we had just signed the papers on the new property, a place we couldn't even live in. It was a repo that we downsized to. Not a small little house, but a reasonably sized house, but it needed a lot of work. And we didn't love everything about it. It had problems and it had issues
Mm.
that we didn't necessarily felt like checked all the boxes. And after I'd signed the papers on the house, driving back to work, headed back, I just really felt the Spirit of the Lord just come all over me. And the two words, almost home, came to me. And
Mm.
this is before, the book came about, but just the thought of the two words, almost home. And so I get back to my desk at work, start thinking about that after I had those two words come to me. And, when you think of almost home, you think about it being, oh, well, I've been driving for a while. There's my house. I'm almost home. I'm getting there. Or you think of it being this place at the end of a long journey, or even with the subtitle that goes with the book, Setting Our Sights Toward Heaven. So many people think of heaven as their almost home. But what the Lord really impressed on me with this version of the two words, almost home, was that this place we were moving to was not quite our home, not quite everything we were going to have. It wasn't going to be perfect. It was going to have problems. It was going to have things that weren't quite right. And so that's kind of where the term almost home came to be, was that it was just going to be this place that was really nice. It was really great, but it wasn't satisfying all of our longings.
Hmm.
Like the Lord really wants us to have that satisfaction when we long for Him, when we long for that eternal home. And so that whole idea of almost home was born right then.
Wow. We had two conversations, and that's the first take I've heard of that.
Yeah,
Wow, that's awesome.
yeah, God's moving.
Man, he's moving. That's right. So, okay, setting your sights towards heaven. Let's talk about that piece for a second because, um, you know, you you left behind some ruins, probably from your last relationship, and so you were kind of in the midst of that, and you're rebuilding a family life, rebuilding your marriage, or rebuilding your marriage life. How is it that you were able to guide your family through the midst of this when you're trying to raise a family that is now multiplying? You're working hard. You're in the storms of life. How did you keep your eyes on heaven?
Adam, whenever I was in that part after I got divorced,
Hmm.
and I know I can speak to that for my wife Katrina, she was in despair. I was in despair. And I can remember so many moments, you know, just I lived in this little apartment where, me and my two kids were not long after my divorce. And I was just a mess. I just felt like I was never going to amount to anything again.
Hmm.
And I would go and spend a lot of times just stepping out on the back porch of this little apartment I had. Probably wasn't more than a 4x4 concrete pad in the darkness, after the kids would go to bed. And I would talk to God and just, you know, say things like, "Why, Lord? Why am I in this mess? What's the end for me? What's it look like from here?" And it was just kind of a place of despair for a while. Like I'm just never going to be able to get out of this mess. I was financially distraught, pretty much walked away from everything, starting over, didn't know if I'd ever marry again. But the answer to your question is you just have to get on your face before the Lord. You have to get alone with God and sort these things out. And the healing from all this doesn't just happen. It doesn't happen in a week or a month. It takes years, decades for really most people to get through all the hurts.
Hmm.
Some of the worst moments in a person's life that they can go through. If you ranked everything, the traumatic events that people would go through, death and dying, of course, and other traumatic events, and divorce ranks right up there with one of the most traumatic things. God never intended for people to be divorced. He intended it to be for life, one flesh, and for mankind to take that and just tear it apart and try to, not have any damage that comes from tearing that one flesh apart. It's hard and it's difficult, so it takes time to heal from all that mess. Some people, I suppose, never really properly heal from it, depending on their circumstances and
Hmm.
how close they are to God.
Wow. So I can imagine the challenge with that, especially with kids in the picture. I'm sure that probably makes it all the more difficult, of a process, because you're walking your not only your wounds through healing, but I'm sure your kids probably had some wounds with that as well. What was it like to do that as a family?
It was a nightmare, quite
Hmm.
frankly, for a while. I mean, we were dealing with, we had two kids apiece, and so we were dealing with this my kid, your kid thing that's just real. It's just I've got my two kids that I want to protect from, everything. My wife's got her two boys that she wants to protect from everything, including me, the stepdad that doesn't know how to be a stepdad. And so it's hard, it's just, it's like, maybe it's similar to adoption, in a way. I don't know, but it's like just something that you're just trying to cram together. And the kids never asked for this, right? They just want everything to be happily ever after, like it was in their mind, when their two parents were together. And so you're just constantly dealing with, the emotions of yourself, your spouse, and the four kids that we had that just had a variety of different emotions, behaviors, you know, all kinds of different outbursts, and of course anger is involved in that a lot. And so just trying to tread lightly and figure out how to trust the Lord to train you and maybe stay a few steps ahead of the kids,
Hmm.
in trying to manage your emotions and manage your feelings, and make sure that we're the ones that keep the level head. And that, quite frankly, it didn't always happen that way. It's hard, just dealing with that. And then when you bring in the two ex-spouses, into the picture, and things that you're dealing with there, it's just not easy. It's hard. Probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
It, it sounds very vulnerable. And so when you get to the writing part, because you had some experiences, and maybe you can elaborate on this a little bit on how you got into the writing, but how did you get to a point when you said there's some lessons here that I think I really need to share, and that is really scary because of how raw that some of these lessons probably hit you. So how did you get to that writing process, and how did you navigate through the vulnerability of sharing this journey?
I think as we were, my wife and I have been journalers for a long time, love to write down our thoughts, and wish I had begun that process a lot earlier in life. But, it's very therapeutic to write down, what you're thinking, and the thoughts that you're processing. But you have to work through that. And as I was putting the book together, certainly that was a long time after, a lot of these raw events were happening. The four older kids that I spoke of, they were, well grown out of the house. The youngest of those four she's 28 now. And so they're all grown adults and living their own lives, and they're thriving and doing great, by the way. But
He's
as
God.
I've yeah, praise the Lord for that. That's just been a gift to us all,
Hmm.
to us and them. But, as I was trying to put together all the parts and pieces of talking about everything related to that, I really had to hold back. I wrote down a lot of things, and, probably have a lot of journals and records of wrongs and things that occurred in our life. But I just really was determined to make sure that as I spoke of this experience with me and my wife and the children and everything we went through, out of respect for the kids and their other parents, I was just really careful about what I actually put in the book,
Hmm.
because I didn't want it to be some big dark journey, with all the blow by blow descriptions of things that things that went good and bad, but I just really was mindful of trying to protect all parties involved for the sake of everybody, because when you put a book out there and you put words out there in public for everybody to see, it's going to come back. And so we have to be careful, what we say and how we say it. And really at the end of it, I think the thought process of writing our story, your story, any story is, we can sit and journal and whine and gripe all day long about, all the hurts and hangups we have in our life. But if we're just griping and complaining, that's all it really amounts to. But when we take those things that we've learned from and use those as opportunities to teach somebody else or to take somebody by the hand to walk them through the same struggle you went through, that is where it's beneficial. That's where you get growth, and that's where we really wanted to be with the book, and
Mm.
I've experienced that in so many ways. The book's been out, as far as me having author copies for maybe 5 months or so. And as I've personally put that book into, different people's hands, friends that I knew have gone through similar experiences, it has just blessed my soul, to be able to see somebody that's like, wow, I really appreciate this story. I really appreciate what you walked through. It really parallels what, I experienced in my life. And that's just worth it all. For every book I get to put in somebody's hand to tell that story is worth every moment.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, and what a victory, right? To be able to
Yeah.
come from those those places of lament, right? In those early stages when uh times were at their hardest, to be able to come through the midst of that fire and certainly avoid the self-destruction that could be a road in the midst of that. I'm sure there's always that off ramp of self-destruction of saying, I'm going to quit. I'm going to throw it in. I'm going to pursue this, that, or the other type of soothing ale, right? Um, but to be able to come through that, to lead your family well in the midst of it, and then get to that place where now you're able to share that as somebody who's been up the mountain, so to speak, to be able to say, here's the path. Here, yeah, I've been through the hard stuff myself, and maybe you can relate to this and apply it in your own life. Like that power of witness is just so uh, magnetic. And have you had? Maybe you can give a couple of examples of that where that conversation has taken place, where you've been able to lead somebody through maybe a challenge in their own life, uh, if that's something you'd be willing to share.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in a men's group, the same one you're in online in the Forge. And, I had a guy that reached out, had a few questions about uh, being in the midst of divorce and all the junk that was going along with that. And he's like living it in real time, the place I was 25 years ago.
Mm.
And he had a few questions, and I answered a few questions he had, online. And then the next thing you know, we connected. And I just gave him my phone number and said, hey, if you got any questions or need to talk, just give me a ring. And so he did one day, several months ago. And this was after the book came out. But I just got to sit and talk to him on his whole lunch hour. And it was just like I was reliving, my past and just
Mm.
answering a lot of his questions about uh, well, what if this and what if that? And I didn't sugarcoat it, it's not easy. It stinks, what you're going through. And it
Mm.
might not even be your own fault. It might just be something that's been done to you. But at the end of the day, maybe some relationships are a little bit easier if they don't have any kids involved. But, any time that you have children involved in a divorced relationship, and then you're going to be dealing with that his house, her house thing, mom's house, dad's house, and that whole situation of kids just going back and forth and dealing with two different sets of rules and two different households and two different sets of opinions of how that child should be raised. It's you and I both know how hard it is just living under the same roof with everybody and trying to make all the decisions, right? But then but
Yeah.
then you got two competing ideals, that aren't quite great, that are going through the eyes and ears and minds of children going back and forth. It's just wretched. And
Mm,
so just being able to speak that into somebody, I can remember he asked me something along the lines of, when does this get any better? And I said, how old's your kid? And he's like, 2. I said, probably not for another 15 to 20 years.
mm,
Because, maybe even longer than that. Because, you just think of, everything you're dealing with child custody and alimony, child support, and all the financial stuff of it. That's just the ugly junk of what you're dealing with when the court, is involved. But it doesn't go away even after the kids turn 18 and go to
mm,
college or go to, get a career. I had, you know, probably dealt with it at different levels with all 4 of our older kids where, they were just dealing with resentment toward us, resentment toward their other parents, resentment toward the whole situation, the cards they'd been dealt. And I think we really went through a lot of different things with all 4 of those older kids where they came back and we've had good, solid growth conversations of healing with them. And
mm.
that's been amazing, and it didn't just happen, it just had to take some time to work all that stuff out and heal from it. So that's been very rewarding, to see that come around full circle when
Mm.
sometimes you just wonder if it ever will. So that's been a really amazing healing event in our home.
Wow. There's a the proverb that comes up often within these men's groups with iron sharpens iron, and the I think the real life application of that is in these moments when you're walking with men who are dealing with those same types of wounds, and to have that experience of encouraging and sharpening them along the path, because it can be a lonely road as a guy when you're in the heart of doing family life. And I've certainly been there. You've certainly been there. I'm sure every man who probably listens to this has been there, that's raising a family, of that quiet desperation of feeling like I need to have this all together. And I have, like, because you have your maritals up and downs, you have raising the kids and the up and downs with that, or if you're struggling to even have kids, the ups and downs with that. And then you're trying to build your wealth, as well as trying to just pay your bills, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to do your career and how to keep some semblance of fraternal relationships with some of your friends together. There's a lot of that weighs down, and if you feel like you're going to go and do it on your own, all of a sudden you see that facade kind of come up, and where you're kind of walking as a shell, and then on the inside you're just distraught, you're cracking a bit. But when you have a guy in your life, or a group of guys like we have with the mastermind group, and by the way, shout out to you, Forge guys, you guys are way to go. Michael and Chris just they got a great thing going on with that. But and that leads into these types of relationships where it's important to have good men in your life who are willing and able to be vulnerable with their own travels, to be able to help lift them up and bring them along the way, because you never know what somebody's dealing with. And it's not a natural for us as guys to just be open and sharing our feelings. And so you have to be really intentional about that. And it takes some fortitude to be able to jump into it and really crack that open from the inside. So this way you can share that with another man to say, hey, listen, the stuff is tough. So I'm going to just open up what I went through. So maybe you can take what you will from it. And I think in that small proverb, there's just so much wisdom in that. I think for us as men to be able to jump in and to be able to iron up and sharpen each other. So, I mean, what a great witness to that Did you have any guys in your life along the way that really helped you stay sharp and kind of help bring you along the way?
Wow, I did. And since we spoke last, I I haven't seen this guy in quite a few years. We just kind of went on separate paths, but I had several, church leaders that just carried me. And I got to go back and see an old dear friend of mine. He was the deacon at our church, and when I was going through all of my struggles and going through my divorce and even after the divorce, and I got to go and talk to him about my book and talk to him about my journey
Mhm.
and my now successful life, from all practical purposes. And I got to thank him. And that, he's like 81, and he was walking with me through that 25 plus years ago for several years. And I just really got to really man up with him and talk to him about a lot of the hard struggles and really just thank him. And man, it just touched me. And when I got to tell him that, just a week ago, it was just a week ago, I got to go to his house and hadn't seen him in a while, but I really got to speak life into him. Now he's toward the end of his life,
Mhm.
and for me to be able to go do that for him, it just made him, just get all sentimental and emotional, thankful, that because he took some time to pour himself into my life, I was coming back to thank him for all that he did to carry me. And so I would say, for anybody that's listening to this, don't forget who's got you and carried you where you are, and get back to them and make sure you thank them and speak out to them and embrace them, because that's the blessing of it all. Is, even for me now, as I try to speak into other people's lives, as I try to share, sometimes you say something to somebody and you never even know whether they cared about it or not. But when they come back and they say, man, this touched me, or you did this for me, or I read this paragraph in your book and it just touched my soul. Man, that's just life-giving. It's amazing. I love it.
Hmm. Wow, what an opportunity to be able to do that, right? To be able to sit back and talk with your mentor past all the stuff and say, hey, let's take a moment and just celebrating the relationship, celebrating the blessing that this has been and the blessing that you've been in my life. Wow, that's powerful. And thank you for sharing that. Boy, if if we had this episode, the first or the second time around, we would have missed being able
Yeah,
to talk about this. So,
yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
hey, praise God for that. Oh man, I love that. So, maybe we could talk a little bit about your process of the book, right? How just the nitty gritty, like how did you sit down and start writing it? It's like you made the decision to, but then how did you start fitting it in? How did you start weaving it in with your career and raising the family and trying to go through all of this? How did you set the discipline? How did you really start making it work?
I'm still working on the discipline part of it. But I tell you, I started just writing stories, probably a dozen, 15 years ago or so, about our family, all the changes we had going on, and just some craziness at times, and that was therapeutic for me at the time as well. But as I was journaling, I started blogging a little bit, started getting interested in writing. And then in the midst of all of our family dynamic and everything, I really was leaning toward a career change. I was a little bit stagnant in the engineering role as a senior designer that I was had been in for uh I don't know, 15, 16 years. and was looking for a change, looking for an opportunity. Some of the kids were older, and some of the older ones were starting to move out, and so it was kind of a time for a change. And I took a job in marketing from engineering, which is just like totally upending my world. And it was about that time that I really started getting serious about the writing process.
Hmm.
And I started doing writing professionally for my work, writing for trade journals and different magazines, getting published and enjoying that. But it just wasn't the full satisfaction I was looking for in the whole writing process, because I just really thought it'd be the coolest thing ever to have a book, with my name on the front of it and be a published author. And so I kind of had some different ideas about a book and what it would be. This one is definitely not the first one I set out to write. That one's still on the back burner.
Hmm.
But but when I got to the writing process, uh, probably the main, I've been writing and jotting down stories for years, uh, putting them in journals, in files on my computer, notes on my phone, things I'd written down and scribble on everywhere. And so, quite literally, I had to sit down a couple of years ago when I was really serious about the writing process and just go through this stack of journals, stack of notes, all these computer files, and just read through them like crazy for days on end, and just, highlight stuff, mark it, earmark it, and set it aside, say, oh, I can use this, I can use that. And it was just starting to churn and generate all the ideas for the book. And by the way, in the midst of all of it, everything that's in the book hadn't even happened yet. So here I am trying to unpack everything from our past and from years back and our journey, while at the same time, there were a lot of things that I really hadn't realized needed to be in the book that were happening in real time. And so that was kind of cool, just being able to see uh, that unfold in real time. That was kind of cool because, I really thought, oh, well, everything's happened that was going to happen that I'm going to write about. But God really had a turn of events and stalled me out a little bit through the writing process. And in 2022, about a year ago, it was actually September 2022 when I got the final manuscript done to start getting that to the publisher. So yeah, it was a process, and you mentioned the word discipline. I think it was probably the messiest thing in the world of me learning how to do that. I've done all kinds of projects for different roles at work before, but just the idea of taking everything in my life and laying it out in piles and papers and journals and digging through it, it's a process. And I'm kind of at that point again with my writing in trying to get started on going on book two to follow this up. But yeah, I got to get some serious discipline going to get that journey started again.
Oh, hey man, I know that messiness. I'm living it on the other side of this door at the moment. I don't know if you can hear the little monkeys running around, but they're freshly up from their naps. They're charged up and energized. I'm sure we're going to catch a little bit on the microphone, but um, yeah, man, and I think that's at least for me. Like when I'm sitting down and writing too, that was my experience with this as well. Is it's always just so sloppy, like because life is always moving. There's no neat little space that I just say, okay, here's my nice little writing time, and and really make that stretch, where it's like, all right, here's my 8 hour block that I just crushed off 70 pages. It was always kind of that same thing where I had notes and on my phone. It was pretty much the same thing. Um, yeah, that's crazy. But so the midst of your writing here, and we had talked about this last time, and this actually really interests me because I love creative spaces. And when you sit down and you get into a space that you actually want to work in, you get inspired by maybe some of the things that are around you, just even looking out the window. You sent over that picture of the lambs, just off in the pasture. That's inspiring to me. That's the type of thing that I would get up and be like, "Oh, it's time to write," and get your black coffee. And what is your creative space like at home? And what are some of the things that inspire you that are in there?
It varies for me. Uh, my wife and I love to walk and go down to this place about a mile from the house where there's a creek. And many times while I'm walking or while we're sitting down at the creek, I'll get inspired, by something, the scenery or, something the Lord puts on my heart, and I'll pull my phone out and just go typing away on my phone. Sometimes I get off and do that by myself, but that's just part of it. And then right now I'm sitting in our sunroom at the house where I'm looking out across the yard and the pasture we have where the sheep roam, and there's a pond out across the way, and so I'll sit here and write at times here in the sunroom, and depending on what's going on in the house. And then at other times, I've got a place that I actually write about in the book that I specifically built after I left the corporate world after 28 years of working. And we built a garage out next to the house on a concrete pad that was here, uh, which was part of the reason why we thought this place was our almost home, was that we didn't even have a garage to park in. There was this concrete pad that people left here that they got started and never finished. And so we built a garage out there, and I had every full intention to make sure that in the back end of that garage, I put a little 10 by 10 room and insulated it well on all sides and the top, packed the insulation in so that I can get out there and hide out at times. And that's where I really brought the book to the finish line last year, was out there in my little place. I actually, because I'm kind of a designer by trade from years ago, I like to draw little logos and pictures and kind of get, ideas about things. And when I was out there after we got the office built outside, which is actually, you wouldn't know it from being inside of a house if you were sitting in there, but we really decorated it well and painted it up nice. But I dubbed that place the Idea Factory, and
Oh, I
made
love that.
myself a nice little logo, put a sign on the door. And so when you go in the door in my office, it's the Idea Factory. And it's really cool because there's so many times that I'm out there. And like I said, when I brought the book to the finish line, I did spend probably the last couple of months of the summer of 22, probably spending 6 hours a day out there. I had a nice little air conditioner that I purposely bought that was just the right size for the space, that kept it nice and cool when it's 95 outside. And so just sitting out there chilling with the air conditioner and black coffee,
Mm.
and just enjoying some good deep work time. And so that is probably my ideal space. And now, I've got pictures of everything from this book, a lot of ideas from this book, and a lot of scripture references and pictures that I talk about in the book, kind of scattered all over the walls. And so now that's kind of like my veteran getaway space that's going to just continue to grow on me over time. And so I got to get out there more often. It's starting to get cooler and cooler out here, and winter coming along, and that's going to be some good riding time.
Ooh. Now you're in Arkansas. Um, how cold are we talking? Is this
Oh,
where you need like
it's like crazy up and down. Some years it's like you never see below 32 very often, but we do have some times when it gets down below zero. So it's rare, but when it dips below 40 here, we're freezing.
we're actually starting to tickle that here in Buffalo at the moment. I'm looking out the window and it's been just damp and raining. Last week we were in the 80s, mid 80s. It was beautiful, beautiful October so far, and then all of a sudden it just came crashing down, and now we're in the like tonight after I'm done here. I'm gonna go light a fire. We've got a little fireplace. I'm gonna start heating up the house because it's chilly. Our 2-year-old came down and was like, "Dad, it's cold. It's cold." I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, kid. Okay, so one of the things I love, and I just ordered the physical copy of the book, so I'm excited to have that in hand. I tried sitting down to do the digital one, and it was just so hard to sit down. Like I can't read on the digital space.
Yeah,
So
me either.
yeah, I gave it a try, and I'm like, I'm not able to do this. So I'm excited to have that in hand. But I was just on your blog earlier today, and your most recent one really set. And I love how descriptive you are as a writer, because I felt like I was on this walk with you, and just a very simple, like, hey, here's my stroll for today. And you had mentioned taking that walk with your wife, but you're on this walk by yourself, and just the description of the spider webs, the mist sitting in the spider webs, and how important it is to keep your eyes on just what's in front of you and not to be so caught up in what is far ahead. But you had laid out the scene just beautifully in a way that I was like, oh, I'm right there with you. And you had some pictures that were there too, and it was a great blog. And I think you're just a great writer. So if anybody who's listening here wants to follow along with David, certainly pick up his book. And I'm going to have some of the details just here, so this way you can click it. But also follow along on his blog, because just go to the website. I'm going to post the link right here so you can check it out. But go check out his blog, because you get to walk in David's life a little bit, and he just sets the scene just wonderfully. So just a great invitation for you to do that. But David, with the next steps here, you got the book done. You're already starting to plan for number two. What comes next in the midst of this Almost Home series, or season that you're walking?
I'm kind of on the fence, really. I actually have 4 or 5 that I have listed that I want to get done. Certainly the one that I had from the very beginning. It was kind of a teenage rebellion story about me way back in the 80s, when I was a worthless wretch before Jesus got a hold of my life and really turned me upside down. But I don't know if I'm quite ready for that. I don't know if I quite have the audience that's ready for that yet. I just feel like something in me says that I need to build a bigger following so they'll be ready for that book when it comes. But
Mm.
but a couple of other things that I really want to get done is and one of them came to me about the time we got this book published earlier this year, was number one, a marriage book about my wife and I. We're going to be hitting our 25th wedding anniversary next April. And
Rats.
so I thought that would be really cool and fitting to write a marriage book for our anniversary gift.
Hmm.
Uh, and then the other book I have in mind is kind of a step back from Almost Home. It's kind of like the journey back. I talk about the house we built on the hill in this book, Almost Home, but I don't go into extreme vivid details about a lot of the backstory behind our growing family, a lot of the stuff that happened with the kids, and
Hmm.
so I'm kind of thinking that that would be my next logical step, is kind of like go back, before, and fill in a lot of the details that were left out in this book intentionally. So those are kind of a few of the different things I have in mind to get done as far as writing, and certainly trying to figure out how to make this a money making deal as well. So we've got to figure out how to fund all that, because publishing books is not a free thing to do. by any stretch of the imagination. So it does cost some money to do that, and keep the lights on, and the heat that's going to be needing to be turned on in my house here shortly too. So
Hmm.
just trying to figure out how to monetize my writing journey and make sure that we get what the Lord's called me to do done.
Well, amen to that. And you have a real gift for storytelling, and but more so than storytelling, but witnessing your own path and God's work in your life. And that's one of the things that I've been encouraging our youth, like in the ministry, is to be able to keep a journal themselves, to be able to track that. We just had our 8th grade retreat this past week. This was another occasion to talk about journaling, where a lot of them they think it's a school assignment, so they just take a question and answer, and they just kind of fill it out. But we kind of went beyond that, of being able to share the inner dialogue of their prayer, and that's kind of new for them, because they're just not used to that. It's something that they kind of had to be led into, and some of them really took to it, because we gave blocks of time for them to do that, and they sat down, and uh, by the end of that, 10-15 minutes, a lot of them were still writing. As I'm walking around, some of them were doodling, which was like, all right. But they were actually doodling some of their story, which was also interesting too. Um, how would you encourage somebody to keep a journal, to be able to keep track of this, and why?
For me, I've got different varieties of journals, and some, I didn't put good times and dates in there. And so every day in my journal, on the top of every single page, I write the date. And a lot of the things I'm writing about, I'll put the time to go with it as well. And so, don't take for granted that next week or next year or 5 years from now, you're going to know what in the world you were talking about and when it was.
Hmm.
So I would definitely advise that. But also, uh, I take spells with what I put in my journal, and sometimes I'll use it to just write down things about the morning. I get up in the morning early, the sun's coming up at 7:05, and it's beautiful, and there's a big pink sky behind it, and I might describe it like that on some days, and then other days don't do anything like that at all. But also, uh just think about the different events that are happening around you, whether it's just you or an event that occurred between you and your family, or you and work, or how you're feeling, about all this. And then another key component for me is, and this is certainly something that you're wanting to teach these young people, that even a lot of adults don't even know how to tune into, and that's the Holy Spirit working on your heart
Hmm.
and speaking to you through different things, through your thoughts, your emotions, your circumstances, and dreams. I've actually got some dreams that I wrote about in the book, and I don't dream all the time, but sometimes I do, and it's very significant, and can really be a guide to you from the Lord, uh, to either guide you in a positive way or perhaps warn you about something.
Hmm.
And so I'm always really careful to make sure that when something comes to me like that, to get it written down in as much detail as possible, because for me, 5 minutes from now, it's going to be gone and I will forget it. And so that's part of the writing and journaling process, is keeping your method of note taking readily available, and just doing it as often as you possibly can so that you don't lose it. And then, of course, that's something I'm probably getting better at, but learning how to organize it really well.
Hmm.
uh you know Obviously I keep uh, a good ongoing journal, that's just my main journal all the time. And then, I write the dates, start to finish at the beginning of and end of that stack of journals that represents a period of time in my life. And so, I'm getting close to the end of the one I'm working on now, and I've got another blank one ready to go. So, that's really key, is to just keep going at it and getting it in there, and
Mm.
utilizing it.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I just finished I just finished volume four myself, and so I've been sitting here pondering up uh my last post, and I did that sitting up stairs in the nursery a little over a week ago, week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. Boy, time's flying. But I was sitting up there, and it was a late night at work, and I came home. The house was quiet, and I was just sitting and reflecting on the fact, like, wow, the house is really quiet right now. And went up to the nursery. We got a little rocking chair there, and little Katiri's up in the crib, and she's just dozing away. And um, I was just feeling really sentimental about the moment, where like how fast time goes. And I was like, I think this is how I need to close out this this chapter in my life. This volume four of journal. And I was thinking about, like, why do I journal to begin with? And looking at Kateri, I was like, this is really why, is because right now Katiri's not going to know me as I am now. She knows me as daddy right now, as the guy who goes to work and comes home and plays a little bit, and like that type of thing, like daddy, daddy. But she doesn't know my hopes and my dreams, and the other two don't. And if I don't have that locked down somewhere, they're not going to know that. They're not going to know how their old man thought, how he prayed, how he wished, how he dreamed, that type of thing. And I was thinking, like, wow, this is a heritage piece that even if nobody else reads it, right? And I'm sitting here where I got the first hard copies of mine just came in, and I was thinking, like, why am I doing this? And even if these don't go anywhere, right? Even if it's just my mom who keeps it up on her shelf, and it's like, okay, I give all the rest away. If I can hand them this hard copy and say, this is a love letter from me to you, and I want you to know who I was in life. When I knew it, not just some old stories that I tell. Missing the dreams that you were talking about, because I have some dreams that have been written in here too. Talk about the Holy Spirit. But that's why I do it, because I want to be able to pass this on from generation, or at least from me to the next generation, hopefully to my grandkids, and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. And I was sitting there just like, man, like, these kids are gonna grow up so fast, but they don't know who I am right now. Like, as I am. So I hope that I can be able to pass this on to them, and share them how the Lord has worked in my life, to be able to share. And we're just open to being a witness and with our life, like how has God been in our life? So it's a great way to be able to track your progress. And for those of you who might be like, I don't really journal, I'm not really into it. It's a great way to see how the Lord is forming you and moving in life. Everybody's story is different. It's yours. It's unique. He's crafted you in a way that is your own. And that alone is worth sharing, because it's important for us to be a witness, right? I mean, that's the call of the faith, is to be able to pass it on. You can't keep it under a basket, and keeping a journal is a great way of doing that. So if you aren't journaling already, maybe consider picking up one of these and start right now. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You just start putting it down, and you start getting process along the way, like you were saying. Put your date,
Yeah.
put your location on it, put your time, sure. And if you don't know how to write, if you're just thinking like, well, I don't know how to, but just however you think, just put it down. Just I think, therefore I am, just put it in.
Yeah,
uh
absolutely. It's not about eloquence. It's about getting the words out.
yep. Yeah. And how many times do we sit down and we write and it feels kind of basic, right? Rudimentary, where you're just quick little jot. But then you look back on it and you're like, well, that jot really captured something that
Yeah,
I think the Lord was really leaning on me for. Um, and life is filled with those little winks, those little moments. It's good to
right.
capture them. It's good to
Yeah.
capture them.
And capture the ones from your kids.
Mm-hmm.
I have some of those in this book, and I have some more for future books. Those little times when the kids said something and it was like, that was just God moving your mouth, speaking to me in a real way.
Mm.
Words of wisdom from your children.
Yeah, amen to that. We had we had an awesome moment with Izzy. We come from two different Christian backgrounds. I'm Catholic myself, and uh, Izzy has a real devotion to Mary, right? And she just picked it up herself, and she came out to me a few weeks ago and was like, "Daddy, I had a dream that Mary visited me." I'm like, "Okay, well, tell me about that." And she's like, "Yep." She says that I need to be good. I need to eat my dinner and to pray. And I was, okay, all right, all right. And I put that in here, right? It's one of those blessed moments where I didn't tell her to do that, but she's just been picking up that prayer language, that prayer life, and I don't know, something's happening there, which is awesome. Wasn't expecting it, just Daddy, I had a dream. Oh, what was your dream about? Well, all right. Okay. So I don't know. God is good. But David, thank you for being a part of this conversation for attempt number 3 here. I think this is great. And I'm sure that, well, here's hoping. No, I'm sure, grace of God, that this thing is captured, because this was a great conversation.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
what's the best ways people can follow you? How can they follow your work? I'm going to put this down here, but it's good to hear it from you as well. Like, what's your preferred ways of connecting with people and having people follow you?
So the book is for sale, Almost Home, Setting Our Sights Toward Heaven, on most of the online sites, Amazon Books a Million, Barnes and Noble, a lot of those places. But the best place is to go to www.almosthomebooks.com. That's my website. That's where the blog is. And there's links there to buy the books as well, and a lot of information there about me. So, yeah, just go to almosthomebooks.com.
Awesome. And I want to encourage you guys to go check out that website, because he does have a great list of blog posts there that you can just check out and really enjoy. And there's a lesson in each one of them, which is fun to pull. And it's a beautiful website too. It's sometimes you come across a bad website, we're like, well, all right, I got to give a little grace here, but it's a beautiful website. So,
Thanks.
David, thank you again for just being vulnerable here and opening up the inner workings of not only just a faithful husband and a father, a disciple, but also the mechanics of your writing, of being able to share a little bit about that dreaming and the doing, that bit of getting it done, and getting to the finish line. So, well done. Well done.
Well,
Looking forward to
thanks,
seeing.
Adam.
Yeah, looking forward to having that hard copy in my hand to be able to crack
Yeah.
open and sit down with. So, awesome. So we'll leave it here, and yeah, we will see you. We'll actually see you this coming weekend, because we have that men's retreat coming up. So
That's right.
looking forward to
Looking
connecting with
forward to
you
that.
there. Yeah, yeah. We haven't met face to face yet, because we've been doing these types of conversations over Zoom in the mastermind group. So it's great to be able to meet you guys in person. So that's going to be a good day.
Yeah,
And we'll cheers over some chicken wings. It'll be great.
there you go.
Awesome, David. I'm going to end the recording here, and yeah, that's how we do. All right, that's how we do it. So I'll end the recording here, and then I'll chat with you just for a moment afterwards. So, guys, thank you very much for tuning into this episode. If you like this, subscribe. We're building this YouTube channel. We're building up this whole conversation, this podcast from the ground up here. So, subscribe and share it if this is of value to you. And you can follow the rest of Righteous Co stuff. You can just go right over to the website or on Instagram, all those things. So, guys, thanks a lot. We're praying for you, and don't be afraid to go out there and do it, to dream it, and of course, be righteous along the way. So, cheers, guys, and we'll see you.